Hello and welcome back to 100 Yards of Football, Sports Talk Radio. I'm your producer, Jeremiah Long, and joining me to talk about the Tennessee Volunteers versus the Georgia Bulldogs in the most anticipated game in college football this season, it's our expert host, Mr. Vincent Turner. What's going on, man?
Hey, how you doing this morning, Jeremiah? I couldn't be more blessed. I couldn't be more honored. I think what people need to know before we get started is both of us are from the state of Tennessee, which is only about, 6 or 7 million people in the whole state. And this game right here is something that I didn't see coming over the last 4 years based on the fact what the Tennessee football program has been. So I cannot tell you the excitement that's in my heart right now that's going to go down over in Athens. See, Knoxville is like a 4-hour drive from Athens. And if anybody knows, see, the last few weeks, everybody's been following us here at 100 Yards Football. And this gentleman right here, I want to say this, is that we really never been in the box here lately. But I would not be where I'm at today. And me and this young man started this dream like 2.5 years ago. And it has exploded. It has ascended. But what's so great about today is that our school that we support, that we've been loving, me personally for my 62 years, is playing the Georgia Bulldogs in the state that we live in. That's what's so fantastic about this. And think about how God is in this plan. I don't mean to put God in this plan. And I think Jeremiah can contest to this. 2 years ago, the Tennessee program was a laughing stock with Jeremy Pruitt. But I like to say this. Kudos to that young man from South Dakota, their head coach, Josh Heupel, who won a national championship at Oklahoma. Kudos to what he's got the Tennessee Volunteers right now at number 2 in the country. Number 2 in the country. So the cities in Tennessee, Gatlin, Ripley, Nashville, Oak Ridge, where Jeremiah's from, Loudoun, is phenomenal, brother. It's phenomenal. But let me get to the football game. First one, I'm going to start with the Tennessee Volunteers. No question about it. Got the number 1 offense in the country, averaging over 50 points a game. Total offense, number 1. To me personally, they got the best quarterback in the Heisman Trophy winner right now, Hendon Hooker. Over 2,300 yards passing this year. Unbelievable. 21 touchdowns, 1 INT. But the guy that's really been surprising is Jalen Hyatt. 5 touchdowns against Alabama. 45 receptions, 967 yards, 14 touchdowns, averaging almost 20 yards a catch. If it wasn't for Hendon Hooker and maybe Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, this young man, Jalen Hyatt, to me, is right there in the Heisman Trophy conversation. But what the Volunteers have got to do when they go to Athens is basically, very basically, the offensive line play. Keeping the Georgia's defensive front off Hendon Hooker and being able to stay what they do best, that fast break offense. Then on the defensive side of the ball, what Tennessee has to do is very simple. Take away the most major playmaker in the game, Brock Bowers for the University of Georgia. He's an outstanding football player. And the most important thing leading up to this football game for the University of Tennessee is going to be at the line of scrimmage, because they're going to play a team that's very dominant. That's their strength on both sides of the ball. Georgia doesn't do anything out of the ordinary. They're going to run the football, and they're going to control the line of scrimmage because they got 2 of the best lines in the country, both from offense and defense. Now, with the Georgia Bulldogs, I would say this. Kirby Smart has done something that I didn't see coming when they hired him 7 years ago. But he has rebuilt the Georgia football program, to me personally, the best program in the country. And he's done it in a very basic way. Offensive line play, running the football at a high level. The thing you look at Georgia this year, everybody talks about Stetson Bennett. Sure, they got an outstanding football player in Brock Bowers at the tight end position. But when I look at Georgia, why they're so successful over the last year or so, and you can talk about that great defense from last season in 2021 when they won the Heisman. But if you look at Georgia through Kirby Smart's time, they've always been able to run the football. This year, over 1,600 yards, averaging 5.7 yards on 286 attempts. DeJuan Edwards leads the team in rushing, had over 100 yards this past week in the rival game against Florida. Kenny McIntosh, Kendall Milton. That's what Georgia does. They're going to run the football, set up the passing game with Stetson Bennett, and they're going to get their playmakers into focus. And if you look what happened last week against Florida on Saturday, very basic. Georgia had over 239 yards rushing in that football game. If Georgia controls the line of scrimmage on Saturday against the University of Tennessee, they're going to win the football game. But most of all, what I'm really pleased at, you notice I keep mentioning the tight end named Brock Bowers. He is a very, very special football player. Everybody talks about Stetson Bennett. Everybody talks about Kenny McIntosh. But we need to talk about Brock Bowers. He is a phenomenal football player. When I was thinking about this with this young man, last week against Florida, he had 5 receptions for 154 yards. On the season, he's got a 31 receptions, 547 yards, 17.6 yards a catch, 3 touchdowns. But when you look at this college football game, you look at all the great tight ends that have made an impact. Keith Jackson at Oklahoma, John Mackey at Syracuse, Mike Dicker at Pittsburgh, David Young at Purdue, Kellen Winslow Sr. at Missouri when I was in school in 1978, Jay Novacek at Wyoming. He is in that class of being one of the best tight ends, maybe the best tight end that's played on a college level. Getting back to the football game, you're looking at everything that's out there, Tennessee and Georgia. Then you go back to some of the great games in this series. I can remember in 1968 when I was 8 years old, Tennessee and Georgia came into the season ranked in the top 20, And that game ended up in the 17-17 tie. That game when the great Jake Scott returned a 90-yard punt return for a touchdown in that game. But what really sticks out in that football game, me being 8 years old, was that Tennessee was down 17-9. And it was also the first year that artificial turf was installed. And Tennessee, under Bubba Weiss, went 80 yards in 2 minutes and 31 seconds. And he had Gary Crease on the last play of the game. From 21 yards out. And then he had Kendall Long for a 2-point conversion. Tennessee 17, Georgia 17. 1968. And then think about 1997. Tennessee coming over the hill, ranked number 2, Georgia number 7. Same type of atmosphere. Quincy Carter in the house with Georgia, Kirby Smart in the house with Georgia, Champ Bailey in the house with Georgia. But that Tennessee team that won their first BCS championship, 1998, T. Martin, Travis Henry, Darren Walker, Al Wilson, Deion Grant, came away 22-3. What a phenomenal football game it's going to be on Saturday afternoon, 3:30 on CBS. And when I think about both teams, I think about the players that have played in these games throughout my lifetime. Tennessee and Georgia doesn't get no better. 2 states that border. The Volunteers, Hendon Hook and that explosive offense. Jalen Hyde, Jalen Wright. Cedric Tillman is back now. Brew McCoy. It brings him back to memories of the great football, the football history of Tennessee. From Richmond Flowers to Willie Gault, to Tim McGee, to Anthony Hancock, Joey Clinkscales, Tim McGee, Alvin Harper, Chuck Ware, Reggie Carr, Anthony Miller, Thomas Woods, Terrence Cleveland, Tennessee, baby. Condrich Holloway. And then Georgia with Herschel Walker, Buck Bellew, Bill Stanfield, Jake Scott, Ken Lawrence, Billy Payne. You can't ask for no more on Saturday. My final keys to the ball game. Tennessee averages 50 points. They're going to go air vile. What I mean by that, they're going to go over the top. Secondary play is going to be very crucial for Georgia. On the defense, it's only allowing 10 points, 10.6 a game. So when I look at it, Jalen Hyatt, Brew McCoy, Cedric Tillman going against Kelly Ringo. I hope Christopher Smith is healthy. He got hurt in the Florida game. Kamari Lassiter, Mr. Bullock. That's going to be the game. And Mr. Smith. Can the Georgia secondary hold up against what Tennessee is going to bring in them? And then from Tennessee, the defensive side of the ball, local young man, went to Tucker High School, Trevon Flowers, that leads that defense. The bottom line, the line of scrimmage. For Tennessee, to slow Georgia down, you got to control the line of scrimmage because Georgia loves to run the football. And if Georgia is able to run the football and control the clock and do what they do best with Stetson Benton, play action, and Brock Bowers becomes a very mainstay in the game, Tennessee defensively is going to have a long afternoon. So with that being said, my predictions on Saturday, my final prediction, the Tennessee Volunteers are going to win a close football game. I see Tennessee winning 31-28. Regardless if Georgia's a 10.5 favorite, the dog fans and the dog media know what's coming. Because, see, I've been listening within the last 24 hours. And I'm very surprised at the line, Georgia favored by 10. But this go for you, Joey T. Joseph Taylor. You picked out of the games on Georgia's schedule, the Tennessee game is going to be the toughest game. NFL scouts are going to be in the stands. Every college football fan is going to have their eyes glued. They're going to have their eyes glued to the TV. My final words today here on 100 Yards Football. Special thanks to my producer and a gentleman who's a pod stay at 100 Yards of Football, Mr. Jeremiah Daniel Long. As I'm going to say this morning, I wouldn't have the success, the blessings, without that young man not believing in me 100%. He's got me to a place that I never dreamed of. So, my final words, we salute you to rock. We will rock you tonight till the guitar bite. Yeah. Stand up and be counted. ACDC. Rocky Top. Woo. Football is highest level like the great John Ward. It's football time in the state of Georgia, 3:30 p.m. on CBS.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And for everyone watching us live or listening to the podcast, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for hitting the notification bell over on YouTube, over on Facebook. And for everyone listening to our podcast, we love our podcast, people. Thank you so much for listening on Spotify. Thank you so much for listening on Apple Podcasts. And if you're not listening to our podcast, please come and join us. If you love streaming radio, if you love listening into the show, then please join us anywhere that you love listening to podcasts. If you're on a Google device like an Android phone, you can use Google Podcast. If you're on an Apple device, you can use Apple Podcast. And everyone can use Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Overcast, or Amazon to listen to the show, or anywhere that you love listening to podcasts. So thanks again so much to Mr. Vincent Turner for that incredible overview of the upcoming game between the Tennessee Volunteers and the Georgia Bulldogs. we'll all be waiting and watching. We're broadcasting live here from Atlanta, Georgia, so you know where our heart is at. This is one of the most exciting games that we could see coming up. So thanks again, Mr. Vincent Turner, for that incredible recap of what we plan to see in this coming Saturday with the Tennessee Volunteers and the Georgia Bulldogs. I'm your producer, Jeremiah Long, and we'll be right back with another live episode. Stay tuned.